Welcome to another episode of Brands Let's Discuss, featuring myself, Fabs, and
Mira. Oh,
and
sorry,
this week,
Mira. So I'm never sure how to answer that.
right, and so this week we kind of wanted to talk about one of the things we've been discussing throughout the week between ourselves is kind of like this new news age where everything's moving so fast. There's so much information out there. We have AI generating news stories. We have one of the most powerful leaders in the world waging a war, seemingly just to distract us for no better reason than to distract us from what's going on in his own history and some of the stuff that could be revealed. And so this non-stop barrage of content and news and information and misinformation can lead us to just sort of be just in a daze. I think what we'd like to do in this week's episode is kind of go through some of that, try to make sense of at least a fraction of it, and maybe try and work out if there are, tactics that we can come up with between the two of us, but also as a wider audience, that enables us to try to make sense of it all and not just be confused and distracted all the time. And then at the end, we've got a few comments that have been posted on a couple of our YouTube videos that we'd like to share with you all and have a little discussion around that. How's that sound?
Sounds like a plan, love. And I was thinking a really interesting place to start would be the fact that seemingly nowadays the American government or the American presidency is managed through social media. So like all of the quote unquote messaging comes out on his own platform instantly as well, Truth Social. Which again has always been ironic in its name, really, hasn't it? It's always been a bit of a joke, really, calling it that. But again, day by day, every couple of hours, it's like, oh, the ceasefire's on, the ceasefire's off, the strait is blocked, the strait is open, the strait is blocked, and now you're just like through what is exactly as you say, this ridiculous barrage through social media. But now the presidency is being run this way. The messaging is being run this way through arguably what was, I'm sorry to say, was the biggest power in the world, which has now really just become, unfortunately, a bit of a joke under Trump and this presidency.
Yeah, completely. Like you say, still the world's largest national economy. So still the wealthiest nation by most measures, but completely messed up by seemingly one individual who has so much control. And to your point around like the way that he posts, someone was looking at how a lot of his posts come out at sort of like 2 a.m. And it's like, what are you doing? Why are you awake at this time? Posting multiple posts, sometimes within minutes of each other, sharing AI imagery that is just offending entire religious groups. His own base is sort of starting to question whether or not he might be the Antichrist. I saw an article where a number of people in the MAGA base are sort of saying, maybe we got this completely wrong and this guy is not the Messiah and is actually the opposite. And so one of the things I was wondering is whether like we should probably try and plot where in the world at 2 a.m. in New York or wherever he is based, is it a normal working day? Because I wonder if it lines up with like Russia or someone else, and if the account is actually just being run by this Russian, he's like, yeah, let's mess up this country. That would make a lot more sense to me. It's either that or he's just on too much Adderall or something else. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason he should be up at that time. But yeah, that is the leader of the free world at the moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because he's based, I guess, in Washington. I think is the East Coast. Oh God, embarrassing geography of America. So the East Coast time zone 6 hours behind us, isn't it? So when he's posting at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, that's the early hours. But then Russia is I think it's about 4 or 5 hours ahead of us.
Right.
Interesting.
Good line up.
There's a new conspiracy theory out there now.
Yeah, guys, you just watched the conception of a new conspiracy theory. You're welcome.
And it is crazy because someone said one of this guy who's I hate to call him an influencer, but he's like a political guy essentially on Instagram and social media. But his name, I think, it's Harry Jessen. And he honestly, I don't know how he does it, but he spends his time debating MAGA people. I honestly don't know how he has the patience, frankly. But anyway, he spent one evening literally just documenting the time of all of the posts. And it is literally all through the night, love. Like, and 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:12 a.m., 2:15 a.m., 2:18, just like endlessly. And then you're just a bit like, but wait, the leader of the free world isn't sleeping, seemingly at all. To your point, I mean, allegedly, like, what exactly is he on? Because he's an old guy. It's not like he doesn't need his sleep, honestly. And then you're starting to see all of these actions that are happening as well that are quite respectfully deranged. Like if a, let's say, for example, everyone loves to talk about business. If a CEO was doing these things at the pace that Trump is doing these things, he would have been fired by the board a long time ago,
Oh,
because this
not
is
even
just crazy.
not even a CEO. If like a graduate was doing that, it would have been like, guys, you're not. We're not taking you on board. You can't behave like this. This is ridiculous. Like anyone with any type of experience cannot behave in that way. It's insane. And I think it's one of those things. It's like you keep thinking, well, how have we allowed this to happen? And there's only so much that we can do as you know, uh, citizen of another nation. Obviously, we can't partake in American democracy. But I feel like actually, like part of what we can do is speak out and sort of say, guys, like our friends over the ocean, like please take a look at what's going on. And that goes back to kind of why we do this podcast, is because we want to add our voice to the conversation, right, to the discussion. I think it's important. I think given that so much takes place on social media, like you say, the presidency's being run on social media. Mainstream news is referring to the things that happen on social media and reporting that back. Like if we're not participating in a meaningful way, then I feel like we're kind of just passengers in it all. And so I'm really glad that we do this, just to sort of say, just to add our voice to the conversation and add our, maybe someone's watching us and thinking this is an uneducated opinion. And you're right, you're more than welcome to have that view. And, we call this like Friends Let's Discuss, because we want people to sort of say, hey, I don't agree with that. And thankfully we have had comments and people have said like, I don't agree with that. And it's given us the opportunity to come back and not have a back and forth, because I don't think that's necessarily productive, but just to sort of state like, okay, I respect your opinion. This is our opinion. And it's good that we're sharing them and having that conversation. And just to wrap up that thought, like, one of the videos that I think have been going around and I shared with you is where someone who was part of the EDL.
What do you think of Rupert Lowe?
Reminds me of me a bit. Back in the day when I was in the EDL, he's saying the same kind of rhetoric that I was. Ban halal, Sherry law, people taking over, but he's saying it publicly now compared to when I was doing it. We were shut down, we were silenced.
So you used to believe that rhetoric?
Yeah, I did, 100%. And then one day the person I hated the most, the Muslim with the brown skin and the big beard, was the one that wanted to speak to me. He wanted to hear what I thought of him and his community. So I ranted and raved for about an hour and a half, saying the most horrible things I could to provoke him. And then afterwards, he just talked to me politely and said, I understand that you have some genuine concern, but you've got lots of things wrong about Islam. So because he gave me that decency, I think, to listen to me, nobody else did. White people just pointed their finger at me. 2.5 years of being in the EDL in conversation with him led me to leave the EDL, because one, I've become more educated on the things I thought I knew. And the most obvious thing is, the first time in my life, I had Muslim friends. I never
was saying, really vile things about Muslim people, and then ended up having one conversation with a Muslim person. And he totally changed his mind and he left the English Defence League as a result of that. And so this is why I think, having discussions, having conversations in respectful ways is so important. And this is part of what I hope that this podcast does.
And I think also because I was talking to one of my friends about this when we were out on Friday. And I think one of the things as well, you and I have discussed a lot, is one thing I hate so much about this media environment that we have right now is the polarization. So everything is forced to be black or white, or it's forced to be right or left, right? And I think as a consequence of that, you end up platforming quite extremist views and really legitimizing them. And the thing that I find the most frustrating about it is often when people on the right come on and they are talking about, I don't know, Muslims taking over or whatever nonsense. There's never any facts to back it up. And as soon as they get fact checked, they then get their heckles up and they want to run out and threaten. So then the presenter is almost scared that they're going to leave. So then they don't challenge them. So then what you have is just this huge platform where all of these unverified, often lies, are platformed to a wide audience. And on social media, often there are people for sure that are brave enough to have. So like Mehdi Hassan, I always think he's one of the best debaters of our time, but he goes on Piers Morgan or he talks to Tucker Carlson or whatever it is, but he has these conversations, but they generate a lot of views because you've got these people just like I just respectfully did not want to do that. Like, you and I have been friends for over 25 years, and I know that it affects the algorithm because we're not fighting with each other. We're not like, you know, we're not shouting over each other or trying to interrupt each other, and it will affect our reach and it will affect how we get to. But I think one thing, if it's fair to say, Fabs, you and I were really hot on is just to be authentic. Like, yes, we'll fully hold our hands up and say we're not fully educated on all of these things, but we really try, in the same way that we have full-time jobs and we're consuming this information as much as we can to try and learn, in the same way that every normal person is just trying to live their life. But anyway, yeah, just to say, like, I think that's where I hope that we would want to offer something a bit different. And I'm with you. I don't really have any interest in going through the back and forth, you know, arguing with people on social media and that kind of thing. But I love to hear people's opinions and perspectives because it makes you think, doesn't it?
And I think this is a thing, like, genuinely believe that there's more than one way to be right. And also that, like, someone's experience of the world can really inform the opinions that they have, which sounds obvious, but like, I'm watching something having lived one life. And, you know, the person down the road has lived a completely different life and so sees the same thing but has a different take on it. And I wouldn't know why they have that take on it unless we have a conversation, unless we have the discussion. So again, the reason why this is called Friends Let's Discuss is because we want to discuss. And actually we want to go back and sort of say, hey, I may not have met you, but I want to treat you as a friend, you know? And so even if it's online, even if it's just in the comments on YouTube, you know, you'll probably start to see the way we reply to comments is like, hey friend, thank you for your response, sort of thing. And just make it feel like everyone can be a friend, you know, give that openness and opportunity to everyone we encounter.
I love that, dude. I think it's also why we've been friends for so long as well, though. You know, and I think also we've also, to your point around like framing. So I grew up in an all-white area. I went to all-white schools pretty much. And then when I went to university, I met you on my second day of university and you brought a completely different lived experience to me. And then as our friendship circle grew, it became a lot more diverse. We had really different backgrounds. We came from different experiences. I remember even something really simple like when we were talking about it and you guys were saying it felt a little bit discombobulating when you first got there because the university we went to was very, very white and you guys hadn't been used to that. And I only heard that from you guys like 5 years ago and it blew my mind because it honestly didn't even quite, for me, it just felt like like home. It was just normal. It's like whatever, you know, and it honestly blew my mind when you told me. And I thought, but that's it, isn't exactly to your point. Lived experiences really matter. And I wonder with people that are so exactly to this guy we were talking about who came out of the EDL, when you actually start to connect with people on a human level and you get rid of all of this noise and this disinformation and the AI, is that really when perspectives change? And if you haven't been exposed, so say, for example, if your experience of Muslim people is simply just what you see on a social media post or some very extreme version of, I don't know, an ISIS video or something, is that formulating in your mind? Or because you've actually interacted with Muslim people, does that change your perspective? And I think that's why London is such a successful city, despite what obviously the right wing say, because there's so much diversity, you interact with so many different types of people with so many different backgrounds almost on a daily basis, and you learn to coexist and live with each other. You know what I mean? Nothing's perfect, but
yeah, of course not. It's really interesting. One, because like it's funny that, we all met up at university and we all came from different backgrounds, but actually we were all from London. It's like the Londoners just found each other. It was like, we need to be around people like us. But also to your point about how diverse the city is, it's funny because my childminder when I was in primary school was Jewish. And so I didn't grow up thinking that being Jewish was any different than being Christian or being any other religion. And I still have that view, that sort of, that's my grounding in my understanding of what Judaism is. And so it's like, when you see how much tension there is as a result of someone just sort of saying they're Jewish, you're like, actually, for me, it's not that they're Jewish, it's that Netanyahu is doing things and the IDF is doing things that are just abhorrent. And it's almost just an unfortunate connection that's being made by people because maybe they hadn't known a Jewish family. They didn't have a Jewish childminder at primary school. So, again, lived experiences are so important, and diversity is so important. It's kind of obvious to say. When I'm saying it, I'm like, I shouldn't have to say that, but yeah, it's just unfortunate that a lot of people don't get to experience that.
And I was thinking about it over the weekend, even, I can't remember what I was watching. I was watching something, and again, it's the problem really with religion for me is humans. Religion is not the issue, to be honest with you. Human beings are the issue, because I say that as a human being who's religious, we are the ones who are the damn problem, because we're the ones who bastardize religion to suit our own ends, right? So in this case, Netanyahu and his right-wing guys, very, very extreme form of sort of Jewish Zionism, which believes that that land was promised to them 2,000 years ago and therefore they own it. And it doesn't matter who's currently there or that human beings are living there, and therefore their annihilation is essentially justified. But then that's really not so different, my love, to the Christian nationalists in America who preach the word of the Bible, but are perfectly happy because they've dehumanized the immigrants that are coming in from South America, dehumanize them to the extent that they see nothing wrong with putting children in cages and having 2-year-olds sitting, representing themselves in a court of law, separating families. They see nothing wrong with chasing, people of any color, because they can't really tell their immigration status, down the street and be violently, arrested. And it's really no different to, in a lot of ways, to the Hindu nationalists, either under Modi's government, where, again, they're taking one of the most peaceful religions that I can actually speak to because I'm Hindu, and effectively bastardizing it to say that Muslims don't belong in the country, that they're less than. And under Modi's rule in Gujarat, when he was the state minister there, I read an article about effectively how there was a rumor that was started that a Hindu girl was raped or something. It's just the same usual, violence against women in these limited situations. And it started off this rampage riot type thing where Muslim people were killed, beaten up, women were raped. He didn't really do anything, right? And then you go to the examples that we see most often. So people using Islam, the word of the Quran, to be able to justify their violent acts, right? And we saw it in the documentary, The Hypernormalization as well, where in the current IRGC, so under Khomeini, he essentially slightly twisted this piece in the Quran, which essentially justified suicide if it was for the ideological purposes. And that's the thing for me, love. When people try to point at one religion as the cause, I'm like, but listen, everybody's doing it. I mean, even let's go with Buddhism, love. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago in Sri Lanka, there were Buddhists in orange robes attacking Muslims. Do you know what I mean? It's, again, the humans are the problem when it comes to religion.
Yeah. And let's not forget the most recent example of Christianity being a problem with Pete Hegseth. I don't know if you saw it. He was given a prayer and quoted it as though it was a legitimate prayer that had come from the Bible or from some religious leader in Christianity. Actually, it was a bastardization of a prayer that Samuel L. Jackson said in Pulp Fiction. And it's like, dude, like, you've got all these like ancient Christian tattoos on your chest. You don't even know the first thing about Christianity. And then you have like J.D. Vance giving the Pope advice on when he can opine on theology. And you're like, wait, this is literally the Archbishop of Catholicism, like the most powerful senior figure in the church. And you're saying that he should think about what he says around theology. Like, who are you? It's wild, and these guys are using Christianity as a way of like justifying this war against Iran. And so it's crazy that it's got to this point and that religion is being used in this way. All of these religions say that, peace is core to their belief, and yet we're using it for hatred. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting.
It's exactly it. And that's the thing, because we went to Christian schools, so we studied the Bible a lot. And again, whenever these guys talk, I'm always thinking, like, are you talking about a different Jesus Christ? Because like I'm so confused right now. Like, you're not talking about Jesus Christ, clearly, because that would be a problem. So is it? What do you think? That's why I always get confused. I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about, because the guy that we learned from talked about peace and love and kindness and generosity to everybody, not just white supremacists. So like, I don't understand what is
Literally
happening.
died on a cross, gave his life so that the rest of humanity could live without sin. And you're like, nah, let's kill these Muslims, let's kill these Arabs. And you're like, oh man, this is so wrong. This is so wrong.
It's so wrong. And it's funny, isn't it? Like, because even on the that Hegseth clip, as soon as he started, it seemed like some of the audience members in the armed forces knew, because you can see quite a lot of laughter in some of the people. Did you see that one?
But it's not like it's not a well-known like speech. Like, that was like an iconic piece of a really popular film delivered in the most like bombastic way you've seen. And so everyone's heard it, and they're listening to it thinking, wait, this isn't church. This is a script reading. Like, what is going on?
And it's so bad, isn't it? It's almost like, there was the guy on, I hate GB News, but this guy on GB News, he's absolutely brilliant. And he was debating Matt Goodwin, the Reform candidate who was running for Manchester. So I think he was previously, he was previously an academic, but over time he'd become more and more right-wing and et cetera, et cetera. But essentially the crux of it was, it seemed like when you actually fact check this book that he'd written, allegedly it had been written by AI, so it'd been written by ChatGPT, and you almost wonder if Hegseth just like ChatGPT, like, what is a famous Bible scripture? This is the one that came up.
But this is it. This is a really great point, because obviously one of the things we saw this week was a really sort of innocuous example of someone asking the question of why in Japanese food, the buns on burgers are slightly askew. And someone gave a response that sounded really like authoritative and was well written. And then at the end of the response said, nah, just kidding, I made that up. And then seeing it being picked up by AI, and AI now giving it as a legitimate response. So it's being verified by AI to sort of say, like, no, this is what happened. Even though the person has said this is completely made up. And so this lives on, right? So Pete Hegseth is probably the victim of this, where someone has said, like, this is one of the most powerful prayers to give to someone. And it's become like just canon now. It's a thing now. It's like we have to be better. We have to be better.
And it's like, these guys, I always think it's really funny, love, because, everyone talks about the negatives of DEI, which incidentally I think is you can tell that it's taken from America, because America talks about DEI, but here we talk about IND particularly. But anyway, that aside, so DEI, diversity, quality, and inclusion. And I think it was Pete Buttigieg, who's a Democratic candidate. He said, so essentially what you're saying when you're against DEI is you're for homogeneity, sorry, you're for inequality, and you're for exclusion. So that's what you're proposing. Exclusion and
Inequality.
what's the other one? Inequality, that's it, exactly. And it really strikes me when you see these people that are, so somebody had done this online, I forget who it was, and you look at the qualifications for these people. So imagine in that audience, right, love? So not least because Hegseth, again, who knows the concept of time under this government, but like 7 months ago or whatever, he called all of the armed services leaders, personnel, all of them, to come to, I think it was Washington, for his big speech that was in the end a car crash. But imagine being like some of these guys, so some of the generals that were fired the other day, like 3 or 4 tours, 25 years within the military service. Imagine having to work for this guy. So like you guys want to talk about DEI, but your whole HII or whatever it is approach is a freaking disaster, because look at these numpties. Like none of these guys are qualified to be in the roles that they've got. Like this guy, then you've got that nutbag RFK Jr. or whatever who doesn't have the qualifications to be the health secretary or whatever his role is. Then you've got Trump, who doesn't have the qualifications at all. Then you've got Bondi and all these people that have been in these really incredibly big roles with big decision-making capabilities that just don't have really any experience. And someone was saying, like, even if you are watching just Fox News now, you wouldn't even realize how unsuccessful Trump is. And that's interesting, isn't it, Lars? So like kind of going back to our point around messaging and media and AI, even in a mainstream media out like Fox News, if you're singularly watching that, the news is so not the news that you don't even really know what's going on.
And this is the thing, again, one of the things we were talking about was how the news in America, according to some reports, is entirely owned by just 7 families. And so when you look at the ability for like free investigative journalism to take place, unbiased, undirected by influential hands that may have connections to the US government or to Trump directly, that's not an option, right? That's not the news media landscape that the US has today. And arguably it's getting that way in the UK as well. And so there is a problem there, when you have someone like as wealthy as Larry Ellison, who is, buying up Paramount now buying Warner Brother. And that includes, CNN and all these other sort of news organizations. And as close as he is to Trump, suddenly you have a position where the rich and powerful are doing what benefits them as opposed to what benefits the service, the brand, what journalism should be. And there's so much that isn't being covered. I know we're kind of speeding through things a little bit, but obviously one of the things that we saw was, I think we're up to 11 scientists who have mysteriously died, and all seem to be related to nuclear research, or I guess some of it is still undisclosed. But why is this just coming out in sort of like social media posts and things like that, as opposed to being covered in mainstream media? Like the number is growing and it's not being spoken about. It's a really weird thing, and only leads to conspiracy theories. You would think most people would want to get out ahead of it. And obviously we saw the question being asked in a recent press conference.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you. I have one for you and then one for Secretary Besson.
Sure.
For you, Caroline, there are now 10 American scientists who have either gone missing or died since mid-2024. They all reportedly had access to classified nuclear or aerospace material. Is anybody investigating this to see if these things are connected?
I've seen the report, Peter. I haven't spoken to our relevant agencies about it. I will certainly do that and we'll get you an answer. If true, of course, that's definitely something I think this government and administration would deem worth looking into. So let me do that for you.
Thank you.
And they said they're going to look into it, but it feels like, why are we already looking into this? Like, surely you should have some answers already when 11 scientists have had their lives taken mysteriously. So it's a really uncomfortable, unsettling thing.
Yeah, not least because, again, apparently, allegedly, Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, that would typically be involved in this, again, who's another supremely unqualified hire, is supposedly an alcoholic or just drunk all the time, and people had to get I don't know if this is true, they had to get a battering ram to kind of get him out of his house the other day because he'd been so passed out. Of course, he's now attempting to try and do the media rounds to try and stop this narrative. But again, there's joking aside, because obviously we joke because we try and apply levity because it's so miserable otherwise. The shocking inadequacy and ineffectiveness of these people. But underlying, it is scary, love. Like, it's like 11 or 12 scientists in very advanced fields, American scientists, have gone missing, have been killed. And there's been nothing, like, as you say, and this is where you'd have like an FBI investigating. I just had a look on social media, and one of the commentators is saying, like, again, Trump is bragging about essentially stealing a Iranian ship, essentially, which again, I'm pretty sure is another war crime. So again, like, it's a very strange thing, isn't it, love, when you see the government run through social media, but also the way that it's taken now as official truth, because the markets almost instantaneously react or don't react. And there's a number of articles that are coming out now about all of these bets that have been placed conveniently 6 minutes before his Truth Social post or 3 minutes before, and like huge sums of money as well.
Now, the BBC has found a pattern of spikes in trades and financial markets ahead of public announcements by US President Donald Trump, including during the Iran war. It's raised suspicions of insider trading, whereby bets are made by people based on information that is not available to the general public. Though some have argued certain traders have become more adept at anticipating the president's interventions. Let's talk to our business correspondent Nick Marsh for more on this. Nick, tell us what you found.
Well, quite a lot of examples of these spikes, Sally. I'll just give you the first one I found, and one of the most prominent ones. It's on the 23rd of March. Trump had spent the weekend preceding that threatening Iran's power plants, much like he is now. But then suddenly, on the Monday morning, before the stock market opened in the US, he said that the United States had had very good and productive conversations with Tehran over a complete and total resolution to hostilities. That's what he posted on Truth Social. So then oil drops by 14%, which is understandable. You go back, though, and look at the trading volume data, and you see a massive spike in the number of oil futures contracts exchanged between about 14 to 16 minutes before the post. That's hundreds of millions of dollars, and those traders will have made a huge amount of money through what's known as short selling. That's just one example of quite a few that I found, Sally.
And Nick,
which typical investors wouldn't do in the absence of inside information. So, like, how scary is this now?
And this is the thing, like, it's clearly rampant corruption taking place. Like, that sort of information shouldn't be leaked at all, especially to people that would be able to benefit of it in such a significant way. I think it's one of those things where, in an ordinary world, an ordinary government, it would happen one time, and then, regulators would step in and be like, this is illegal, this can't be allowed to happen going forward. We're clearly not in normal times, and it's kind of an understatement, but Trump is just operating the US government in order to make himself and his cronies wealthy. It's not too dissimilar to what we've seen happen in other countries, whether it be, Russia or other countries, where we kind of look down on those countries and say, oh, they're so corrupt. Like, the Western world would never be like that. Well, guess what? Like, this is it. This is what's happening right now. So, I don't know. Like, again, we go back to the point we made earlier. There's not a lot that we can do other than have conversations about it and speak about it frankly, whilst we still have, a media and a government that won't punish us for, free speech. And let's hope that it stays that way for the foreseeable future,
Who knows, right? Because there's been, I sent you this wild clip on social media of Australians in Brisbane who were dressed as if they were going to a party that was singing some old-ass song that apparently had the lyrics from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
And it was a way of protesting this
Yeah.
increasingly sort of what they feel are draconian laws around criticism of the state of Israel for their genocide in Gaza. And this phrase, from the river to the sea, again, I'm not even going to get into it because God knows there's like about 80 different perspectives around what it actually means. But essentially, it just made me really laugh when I saw it, because I'm thinking, like, firstly, there were so many people in that crowd who were there, like, you know, partying it up. So have a look on social media if you guys can get a hold of the clip, because it's really fascinating. And the power of, again, it's the power of the people to say, this is wrong, I don't agree with this. And this strange kind of area that we are in now, where, again, governments aren't really acting in the interests of their people, or listening seemingly to their people, and they're operating on this other layer where, unfortunately, again, we've mentioned this a few times, but again, British pensioners are being arrested on behalf of a foreign government. And that, I still think this whole thing is really wild, isn't it?
It's
You
crazy.
I don't really, I mean, all the signs are there. Like, exactly, you were talking about Russia, love. So I started reading a book called Cuckoo Land, which is this really fascinating book by this investigative journalist, and he's pulling together all of these threads, essentially Russian corruption. So post the end of the Soviet Union, obviously, when all of these utilities and things became effectively aware, open, and then suddenly the oligarchs effectively swept in and claimed all of the, Russia's natural oil resources, telecommunications. This is around telecommunications network. And again, it's really fascinating. I mean, I'm only about, like, I think a fifth of the way through, but it's so fascinating, love, how these guys, they just operate on a different layer to the rest of us. You're not talking like $1 million here or $2 million there. This is $400 million here, $400 million there. I'm just going to give him 5 billion to shut up. I'm just going to give, and then you're like, and underneath, ultimately, the crux of what I've read so far is essentially the telecoms capabilities, facilities, the businesses effectively have been stolen from the Russian people into the hands of a minority of people, effectively. And again, to your point, really, is it really any different to what's happening in America, where there's a vast consolidation of monopolistic power in things like the media, and we've seen it, and even exactly to your point, in the UK, it's becoming incredibly dangerous. So the guy, for example, there's an article in the Byline Times, the guy who owns GB News is spending about £100 million of his money on GB News, and it's operating at a huge loss. But why is he doing that? None of these guys are benevolent. They're not like, oh, I get into business to lose money. That's the problem we're in, is because they do the absolute opposite, right? At all costs, which we'll come on to with AI. But again, it's really scary because they're prepared to spend 100 million on this because they want to infect our people with this narrative. So again, he's similar to the MAGA movement. I think he's like a ultra-right Christian nationalist who think that, wants almost like a religious war with Islam and all this kind of nonsense. But he's happy to spend that 100 million. What could that 100 million have done, love?
Yeah.
In this country? Like,
Yeah.
genuinely, like, you didn't want to pay those taxes to actually help your fellow man, but instead you want to infect people and create this kind of segregation and this divide, which we are seeing more and more, which I was talking to you about this week on this article that I read in The Guardian, which incidentally was a bit like what we were talking about last week. And this guy, Simon Osborne, is talking about how he feels like he's losing his mum because she's been increasingly affected by all of these far-right narratives on social media, to the point where she's now like a big fan of Tommy Robinson. And he doesn't even know how to talk about her. So I was wondering, like, because I was talking to your wife about this as well, but like, do you think, love, that social media is as dangerous in the hands of the older people as it is in the younger people?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's almost a different sort of danger, and so obviously I work in social media. And so I think my take is often like the unpopular take. that unfortunately this is just the latest iteration of something that's happened in society since time immemorial. And the difference is that the pace of advancement of technology means that we've just not been able to sort of get a hold of it. But unfortunately, social media is simply a reflection of society. Like, all of this exists in society. And, you look back at history and it's always been the case that the wealthy have divided the general populace by sort of pointing at different groups and sort of saying, it's not us that's the problem, it's this group over here. And it's just worked. It has always worked. And so it's the well-worn playbook that is always used. I think the difference is between young and old is that young people at least have an understanding that through engagement with technology that, some of what they see is fake, some of what they see has an angle to it, some of what they see is just untrue. Whereas I think with the older generation, they find it hard to spot. And not to say that the young people are unaffected by it. Like, I have a younger cousin who was really bought into this conspiracy theory around fluoride in toothpaste. And so he
Yes, I remember you saying.
he started buying toothpaste without fluoride until he lost 2 of his teeth and realized that actually having fluoride in toothpaste was a really good thing. And so it's one of those things that it can impact young people as well as old people, of course. So yeah, I'm sort of cautious not to sort of say that's only, the older generation that are able to sort of be bamboozled and hoodwinked in this way. I think the last point I make is that obviously politicians know that in the main, older people are sort of more likely to vote. I think maybe that's changing. I think the younger generation are becoming more engaged in politics. And so I'm sure if we were to do a poll, you would see a shift over the past 2 or 3 decades. But I think it's still the case that older people generally vote more and are more likely to swing a vote if it comes down to, fine margins. So again, maybe that's a bigger danger, but I don't know, what do you think? I know you had some thoughts on it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that exactly to your point, I think that the concern for me particularly is because there is so much voting power concentrated in the older generation. And again, I agree with you. We're not generalizing across everybody, of course, because that would not be fair. I think what we're possibly saying is because they're not digital natives, it is perhaps harder for them to kind of filter through. Even like I would say my mum and one of my uncles, they've kind of sort of beaten the tide in that as they've gotten older, they've become more and more aware of what we would consider was on the left. So for my mum, a reckoning was George Floyd, which completely altered her perspective of everything that she had been taught and she had learned before. And for then she started looking at alternative sources to find information to kind of beat the propaganda. So I'm super proud of her because she constantly asks questions, but you see, even with her, like, we kind of joke about it, like, because of the way YouTube works, often she gets pushed Russian propaganda videos. So she kind of feels like sometimes she's always like, yeah, but Mira, I do think we're being quite hard on Russia. And then I'm like, and then we're like, we have to have a big debate, a conversation. And then she takes it. When I credit to her, she's open to listening, like she's open to the debate and to have a conversation. And I think that, yeah, so to Fabian's point, like, I think I mentioned it a little bit last week. So when I was with family in Southeast Asia, the first question I got asked when I sat down was, so I hear the Muslims are taking over London. And I was like, oh geez, oh good God in heaven. Like, for those of them that are listening, you guys know that we then had a debate about it, and then I tried to explain that obviously, unfortunately, this is a far right narrative, and there's nobody taking over. 86% of the UK population is still white British, so it's not ethnically white. That the iftar that happened in London happened in a myriad of other events, including, celebration of Hanukkah, of Holi, of Diwali, of Christmas. They did Versace the other day, which is a
Yeah, I
Sikh
saw that.
festival. So
That looks
there's
really good as well.
it was, wasn't it? It was
Yeah,
really
it looked
good.
really, yeah.
And I love that because, again, we are representing the diversity that we have in London in an inclusive way. So we can't have every religion represented, but don't allow the Muslims to come and celebrate when their festival is over.
Right.
Like, that seems crazy.
And that was a Muslim mayor doing all of that, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's not like there's some sort of like Muslim agenda. It's like all of these faiths are welcome. Like, I'm not against any of these. I'm fully supportive of everything, and like, you know, he celebrates with regardless, like whoever it is that has you know, a festival going. So, you know, there's a lot of love that I think is really important. That's kind of goes missing. And, you know, the fact that your mum is so open, I think, is because, you know, she knows you love her and she loves you. And so, you know, there's that sort of trust that comes with it and a way of having conversations that I think is often missing.
The thing is, love, like, okay, so wait, I'll make 2 points before I get on that. So one is, in the Gordon and Denton election, so for those who don't know, there was an MP seat in Gordon and Denton in Manchester, which the Green Party won. So immediately Reform lost by quite a big margin, and immediately Reform came out and tried to come up with this narrative around family voting, i.e. the Muslims, they're so like oppressive of their women that they're standing outside the polling booth and telling them how to vote. And then people were like, but hold on a second, just so I understand what you're saying. So this really dominant, oppressive religion is voting for a party who the leader is a gay Jewish guy. Is that what you're saying?
Make it make sense, please.
Make it make sense. Like, so it doesn't make any sense, clearly, because people are absolutely voting for the issues that matter to them, as one would expect, you know, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, having this, and the thing is, love, and I know, I respect that you say that, and obviously you know that I love my mum a lot, and I'm super lucky to have her. And I would say one of my uncles as well, we spent a lot of time debating this stuff. With the family, what was interesting, and actually I was talking to your wife about this as well, and our friendship group, is that what I find fascinating is, in this article that this Guardian journalist had written, his mum just doesn't listen to him. And what I find fascinating is, how have we ended up in this place where people on social media, AI-generated content on social media, is more valuable to you and influencing of you than your own loved ones, your friends and your family and the people that you surround yourselves with in your community? How did we get here?
Yeah. I can only, like, and this is the thing, it's like, I don't want to try and get into, you know, that journalist's relationship with his mum, because what the fuck do I know, right? I think it's just, I can't even begin to get into that. I think, yeah, I wish people could sort of see the relationship you have with your mum and that be more of a template to, you know, how you have relationships with your parents and maintaining relationships with your parents throughout their life, throughout your life, because I think that's so important that, you know, it's never easy. So like, I don't want to get out of pocket and sort of tell people how to like have relationships with their loved ones. Like it's all down to the individual, but you know, you got to keep people close, you know, and you got to try and, yeah, just manage those relationships, because like, I would cry if ever like my mum trusted social media more than she trusted me. Like I would lose it. And that's because like we've always been so close, you know. So yeah, I
Guys
don't
have a lovely relationship. I love to see you guys together. So yeah, we are blessed, and I know. And again, like you say, we're not. Neither of us are here judging this guy. We actually, the reason we even decided to talk about it is because of the conversations that I had. And then I talked to you guys about it, right, just before we went to see Akala. And then Akala brings it up as well in his talk as well. And then we thought, it's a funny thing that this is coming up now more and more. And again, we're not saying all pensioners, because also on the other side, we've got a load of pensioners that are being arrested by police because they're protesting against the genocide in Gaza, which again is just, every time I see these guys, I just want to give them a hug, because I'm so admiring of their bravery. So again, we're not saying it's everybody, of course, we're not saying it's every generation. I just think it just was interesting to me because, again, with the family, I think one of my uncles as well, and in credit to him, because he was saying to me, Mira, what really worries me is I don't know how to tell what is AI generated content and what is not. And I said to him, do you know, I rate you because I don't, it's really hard. Like, it's really difficult to do so.
And
And
only
there
getting
needs to
harder.
be more. Yeah, exactly. And there needs to be more and more controls around it, right? And then he was saying, so then he says, yeah, for example, like, you know, I really think what Trump is doing in America is really good with ICE, because at the end of the day, America has so many illegals. You know, they just opened the borders, and then, you know, your country did the same, and all of these illegals are flooding in. And I was like, but uncle, respectfully, we've never had open borders. America has never had open borders. It's always been a really strict visa system. Like, that's not how this thing works. Oh, no, but yeah, no, I'm not saying that, but you know, you've had open borders. And I'm like, but either you have open borders or you don't have open borders. It's binary. Like, there isn't a middle ground here. If you have closed borders and people will try and find a way in because they're desperate, that's the situation that we're in at the moment, let's be honest. But again, it's because I think as he's saying it, and I could see his brains like ticking over, because then he's like, wait a second. No, okay, wait. Yeah, no, wait. It can't be open borders and it can be like strictly controlled visa requirements. So, but again, you see, love, even that whole narrative, the wording that is used is a Fox News narrative. It's a right-wing narrative. It's like, Trump will always say, like, Biden opened the borders and he let everyone come in. And like, even trying to get a freaking I had to get my visa to go work in America. Oh, Jesus H. It was a hell of a long process, may I tell you. So, like, again, it's false. Like, in the UK as well, when you talk about immigrants, like, who exactly are you talking about when you say illegal? I think you mean people that come over on the boats that have no visa and have no right to be here and then step foot and claim asylum. Claiming asylum is not illegal in and of itself, right? The other people that you're referring to, which you seem to be getting confused on because, again, it's obfuscated, are people that are here on visas. They're skilled people, or they've had to, because the Conservative government increased the bar, right? Now you have to earn a minimum of 35,000 in order to be able to come in. You can't always bring your family and blah, 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 blah. Like, there's a lot of rules, and to the point where net migration in the UK is almost zero this year, because we've really turned a lot of people off coming here because they have no future here.
The thing that bothers me the most about this immigration debate is that, you know, what is it that they think the immigrants are doing, and how is that like accelerating the cost of living crisis? Because that's the biggest issue we face at the moment, to my mind, is that actually cost of living is just skyrocketing. Inflation is always going up. Like, all of these things are entirely out of the control of immigrants coming across in small boats. Like,
It's access, love. I saw this exactly to your point. So when they were talking in this article that Simon Osborne had written, he was referencing this far-right multimillionaire who was telling people something like the asylum seekers get access to housing first, so you're pushed to the back of the queue. So they get housing ahead of you. And also, we're paying £11,000 a year to help treat asylum seekers who've got AIDS. That's money. So it's this whole net zero things. There's a book about it which I forget the name of, but essentially this idea there's a finite amount of resources, and because you're giving to someone else, you're not getting. So then all of the social housing is prioritized for the asylum seekers. They get all the housing. They get these 4- and 5-star hotels to stay in, which we obviously know is a complete load of bollocks, but that's the narrative that's being spun. You know, like, that's the thing, I think, love, that's so, and again, it's so egregious to me because it's a lie. But what they do is they always form it in like a kernel of the truth. So technically they were housed in hotels, but they're never going to be hotels that you and I paid to stay in, because
you
they're
would not
like
see me inside of that room.
right? They're 1-star. They're not even starred. They're run down, dilapidated. People have left them, which is why they're available. Even that one in Clacton or East, or whatever, that was protested, that was a shithole.
Yeah.
So like,
that was never something that you would have access to or wanted access to. You would never have been that. Like, so what are you complaining about? It's an unused space. Like, it's ridiculous. And like I say, like, for me, obviously Brexit resulted in so many people leaving the UK. And as a result, prices went up, right? And so again, it's like, the problem isn't the immigrants, it's these the concentration of wealth in such a small number of people. And, you know, it's one of those things, like, again, we go back to it. The wealthy have always sort of said, hey, we're not the problem, it's these people, this marginalized community. And it works so well. I just wish we could, like, move past it, but here we
Wish
are.
we could. But it's so effective because the whole narrative, and again, I forget, I can picture the author and I can't remember the title of the book, but the whole narrative works on this idea that there is a very finite, very small bucket of resource available, and then it constantly has to be split and shared. So if I give to you, Fabian, because you need unemployment benefit, then that's it. You're taking from me and you're costing me money. But actually, what we're forgetting is that it's not this big. It's actually this bloody big. It's just they've only given us like this in this
Crumbs.
huge piece. And that's the piece, right? That's the piece that is so difficult to get across, because then you've got this whole thing, like you'll go, even we will talk to one of the comments, even this idea that, oh, people's salaries, at least people who weren't, oh, but people have worked so hard. Are you telling them that they have to? No, guys. You're
Listen to
not talking about the 99% here. You're talking, not even the 99. You're not talking about the 99.9% of people here. You're talking about the 0.1%. The people for whom 400 million is a drop in the ocean, 100 million, a billion. Like, the fact that as a society, we're not angry enough that there are billionaires that exist in this world shows you how brainwashed we all are, because nobody needs £1 billion. Nobody needs that amount of money. And it is wild to me that you have people that are in the lower working middle classes that are arguing for billionaires and for multimillionaires, because respectfully, I think you've been brainwashed.
100%. It's even got to the point where in the service economy, they're saying that they're investing less in, like, you know, economy class travel and more in business class and first class travel, because that's where the money is, because there's so many wealthy and the poor are just not able to travel anymore. And so there's no money to be made in economy at all anymore. And it's the same in sort of restaurant industry, like a lot of sort of like restaurants that sit in the sort of middle of the scale are struggling to stay open, yet the really high-end restaurants are fine because they're insulated against all of this. And so you've got this really distorted economy where, like, the middles and the lower are so squeezed that it's really hard for us to participate. But those at the top are laughing, you know, they eat in the finest, they're traveling in the finest cabins, everything is just great for them. And yet we're still arguing about people crossing in small boats. It's like, come on.
Insane, honestly.
Come on.
And it's fascinating because even when you think about people, so like, for example, Hassan Pike, who I talked a bit about last week, he's this streamer, he's like this political commentator now. He's essentially a democratic socialist. So like Zoran Mamdani, he believes in more equitable distribution, free health, you know, universal healthcare, all these kind of things that frankly in Europe we have a standard. So like, again, it's not really that radical, but anyway. What's really interesting is when you see the kind of comments that come back to him. Oh, but you're a millionaire, but you've got a $4 million house in Hollywood. And you're like, but sorry. I'm sorry. I feel like you're missing the point here. And this happens to a lot of people, by the way, who've got money that are on the socialist side. The point is they're saying they have the money and they want this to be more fair. And you're attacking them because they have the money and they want it to be more fair. They're not saying that the whole capitalist system has to collapse. Despite what the far-right narrative says, they're not talking about communism because that isn't workable, at least not that we've ever seen. And maybe it is, but we've never seen it. What they're just saying is, let's have a more equitable form of capitalism, where what has happened over the years is that all of the efficiency gains that were promised under free market capitalism, the free market ideology, haven't gone back to the workers as was originally intended. It's all been concentrated in the hands of a very, very tiny few minority people who then use that money to steal even more power and influence, as we are seeing increasingly from the lack of our governments acting on our interests. That's all people are saying. Nobody's saying it's a bad thing to have money. Nobody's saying you can't aspire, you can't get up to the million or the 2 million. And if you want to, that's absolutely your choice. That's the point of capitalism. But if you get up to that level, then pay your fair share so that you contribute to what the rest of society needs. And I just cannot understand how the counter that comes back is this one. Is that, again, is it because we were talking about this yesterday, like, is it because people just like to be angry on social media and they just want to fight? Or is it because they're not really listening to and maybe it's the clip. You haven't really listened to the whole thing, so you're listening to the clip and you're adding 1 and 1 and getting 9, or you're acting on behalf of the millionaires and billionaires. Like, I don't know, love. What is
I think
it?
it's also that thing of like, a lot of self-made people, so-called self-made, assume that everything that they've done has led to all of their success without appreciating that the environment that they're doing it in, that they should be paying taxes to maintain, also allow them to be successful. And they just think that they're sort of working in an isolation and that they shouldn't have to give back in any way now that they've made it. And I think that's one of the things I sort of come across, whether it's in, reading articles or even having conversations with a few sort of business owners. They're like, well, why should we have to give back? It's like, what do you, give to the environment that allows you to be successful. It's a very simple thing. But it sort of goes missing. Mira, there are a few points that we wanted to get to, a few stories that we wanted to get to, and I'm mindful of time, but let's try and cover them if we can. Would you like to start with what's happening with Keir Starmer and Mandelson, or the 62 million?
Yeah, I mean, we can start with Keir Starmer. So again, it's a really interesting one with Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer is a UK Prime Minister, and he's kind of been embroiled in this scandal because Peter Mandelson has appeared many times in the Epstein files. It's been very clear that he's had a very close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And Peter Mandelson was elected when Labour came into power as the ambassador for the US. So when the scandal broke, essentially Peter Mandelson was fired, and the police also arrested him pending inquiries as well. Keir Starmer denied any knowledge of knowing that he was in the Epstein files, essentially. And there was a huge amount of kickback and pushback against Starmer. Now, I think we discussed it in a previous podcast, but I believe to me, it was just nonsensical that the person who didn't appear in the Epstein files was getting more stick than the people who had appeared and were actively part of the Epstein files. And again, now this has now come again because it turns out that in the Foreign Office vetting process, Peter Mandelson was flagged as being at risk, and he was still elected. So the question is, did Keir Starmer know that he was flagged and then put him in the position anyway? Or did he actually not know, which is now what he's saying, that the Foreign Office just didn't tell him that the vetting had failed?
I also think the question is, that isn't being asked, what damage was done to the British public as a result of that? And I think it's hard to sort of see what went wrong, as opposed to, yes, Peter Mandelson is a foreign person and should not have been associated with Epstein in any way. And there are sort of moral issues as a result of some sort of inadequacy and competency that took place in the decision-making process. Well, I think I've said before on this podcast, I think Peter Mandelson was chosen because he had an existing relationship with Trump as a result of his broader relationship with Epstein. And as uncomfortable as that is, given who Trump is, Trump being, an outlier among politicians, it probably on paper made sense to have Peter Mandelson be the US ambassador for Britain. In that role, it's not clear, and there's nothing that I've seen that suggests that he has done anything wrong or anything that harmed, Britain in any way. There's a suggestion that maybe there were some sort of secrets leaked. I don't know, maybe that's where the crux of it is. But it doesn't seem like at least during his tenure, that there was any reason why people felt Peter Mandelson was a bad ambassador, or that Keir Starmer should not have chosen him based on the activity that he did. And I think we're in this weird position where all of the opposition parties have said that Keir Starmer should hand in his resignation and he shouldn't be Prime Minister anymore. And I think even some Labour Party members are almost like pushing for Keir Starmer to leave his position as Prime Minister. To me, that seems like the worst thing that could happen for British politics at the moment, because it just creates so much instability in an already unstable environment. And just to wrap up, one of the things I think was really outstanding during the Hungary elections when Peter Magyar got voted into power was that because there was such a clear need to get rid of Viktor Orban and his party, the other parties that were vying for votes realized that Peter Magyar and his party were going to be the best party to go against Viktor Orban. And so they all stepped back and said that the vote wasn't split. I kind of wish that British politics was at that point where there was enough maturity to sort of say, actually, this is a really dangerous period in global politics, and having an unstable Britain is the last thing we need. So maybe let's not push for a prime minister to be forced out and to go through another election and to start all over again. Like, we kind of need like some amount of stability, whether it comes from us or anywhere else in the world, and it doesn't look like it's going to come from anywhere else. I don't know. Maybe maybe my bias in wanting Keir Starmer to stay in power has clouded my judgment, and I'm open to someone coming in and saying, no, you're wrong and you shouldn't apologize for this inadequacy and this incompetency from Keir Starmer. But I would rather him stay in power than be forced out at the moment. I don't know where you are on it.
Yeah, and I think before I go on to me, love, one thing you wanted to add was around Boris Johnson.
Yeah. So one of the things we saw is that if you go back, I think it was 2019 when Theresa May was in power, she had the opportunity to put Boris Johnson into a very senior position, and he didn't pass the vetting check, but was still put into a position. And long story short, that was like a news agenda for maybe 24 hours.
And a case in point, love. So even with that Boris story, so yes, he failed the Foreign Office checks. When he came into power, he also was supposed to release a Russia report, which the security services had done to really assess whether there was Russian interference in the election and in Brexit in particular. He didn't release it, even though he was under pressure to. He just refused to release it, which again, to me, is quite telling. Incidentally, in the latest cache of the Epstein files, the Byline Times uncovered that there were lots of conversations documented between Steve Bannon and Epstein about forcing Theresa May out and putting Boris Johnson in, as well as lots and lots of conversations around Brexit with Farage as well. None of these things I have seen, to your point, been flagged anywhere except in the Byline Times article, which again, to your point, is really telling. And it just shows the breadth of the Epstein class and how they're these puppet makers in the background, again, operating at a very different level to the rest of us. And again, love, I think a lot of people, potentially will comment negatively on this video, and they always do whenever I talk about Keir Starmer, because he's just so not liked. He's not really liked on the left by a lot of people. He's not obviously liked on the right or the middle either. He isn't charismatic. He doesn't always say the right things. And he doesn't really seem to be consistent, like most politicians, respectfully. And I think that's also why the Green Party is doing so well, because Zach Polanski is unwavering in his consistency. Like, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm going to stick to. This is what's right and wrong. Again, we could argue he's the outside in, etc., etc. But I agree with you. I don't personally think in the kind of gamut of things that Keir Starmer could be held to account for, I personally don't think this should be dominating the airtime. Right now, this is not the priority for the British public. Like right now, we have a war that America and Israel have created that is negatively impacting the rest of the world. At some point, fuel supplies are going to run out, so airlines can't operate, which means that they're going to start losing money. The economy is already on the precipice of a recession. So they're talking potentially in 6 months' time, there's going to be a recession. We already have the highest social spending bill in our history because of the pensions and the NHS, and now a number of people that are unemployed that are claiming unemployment benefits and are not economically active. We have like a lack of funding in regional areas that are supporting regional. There are so many things that you can hold him to account for that this to me is not the thing, respectfully. Like, and I also, the other problem, love, I agree with you. I think we need stability. We need to have, and also like, I don't even know who would replace him, honestly, because there aren't really any standouts. I mean, Angela Rayner would have been a really good person, I think, because I think she was really popular, but obviously because she did the honorable thing because she made a mistake or whatever you want to say about her taxes. But again, the double standard in the media is Richard Tice has set up a corporate structure that has actively avoided paying taxes. And he's now trying to gaslight people that the 100,000-ish corporation tax that he actively avoided paying is somehow just like, yeah, well, it's not really a big deal because that's the way just things are done. Well, yes, it's called tax avoidance. And actually, like, tax avoidance costs this country more money than asylum seekers do by like 10x, I believe it is. So like, again, it's just so annoying, honestly, love, because the double standard drives me nuts on all of this.
The point that Keir Starmer changes his mind, I find interesting. I always feel like a politician should enact the will of the people. And obviously we're quite a divided nation. You know, obviously, the Brexit referendum showed that quite clearly. But, we know as a nation that, there's a group of people that feel one way and another group of people that feel the other way. So to have one person enact the will of that nation is always going to be challenging. This might sound, again, I'm very contrarian in a lot of the things I do. But to have a prime minister that sort of says, okay, I thought this was a good idea, but I've heard the people and they think this is a bad idea, so I'm going to change course. I'm like, fantastic. Like, this is what I want. And don't get me wrong, we should have maybe like a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan that everybody can sort of say, okay, like, this is the direction we're going in. Your approach to the war, for example, in Iran was to be like, we're going to support the US because they're our closest ally and have been for centuries. Then, okay, that kind of makes sense. If you then realize actually what they're doing is wrong and say, no, we're not going to let them use our bases, that's a good thing in my mind, okay? And, again, we started this conversation saying the world is moving so fast, social media is accelerating the pace of this new news age. And so people's opinions are changing really fast as well. And so again, having a reactive person, I don't think is as negative as, the media want to make it out to be. And I would rather that than someone that just was headstrong and just did what they thought was best, regardless of what the general public thought.
I do agree with you in some senses, love. I think the bit that I struggle with, though, is how are you listening to the general public? Like, what exactly, like, who are you talking to in the quote unquote general public that is allowing you to change your opinion, right? So, like, for example, they always talk about the opinion polls. I don't think I've ever completed opinion poll in my life. So, like, who are the people that are completing the opinion polls, for a start? I would love to. And if you look at the small print on a lot of them, it's like sample size 250 extrapolated to a population of 58 million or 70 million or whatever now. I think that's the only, and I actually think that's where he was unsuccessful in the Morgan Sweeney era, because he was constantly flip-flopping, right? Everyone was like, he just has an opinion because he's constantly like, oh, what did they say? Oh, who said what? Oh, okay, quick, let me flip. Oh, let me flip here, let me flip there. And then it was like, even that speech that he did on immigration and the rivers of blood or equivalent.
That was bad.
Again, that was really bad because you had heard that the people were all supporting reform because they hated immigrants. You were like, oh, I know. And then you were like, oh, no. Then I changed my mind. Or like, oh, no, people didn't. Oh, that was too extreme. Oh, then I'm going to flip. Then I'm going to flip. I agree with you in the sense, love, that there is an element of public opinion because at the end of the day, you're acting for us. So there's broad things that I think are really important that you should honor, right? Like, for example, we voted in a party that cared about the national healthcare system. So if you are unilaterally deciding to shut down the NHS and put in an insurance-based system, then yes, that's fundamentally against what we voted for. We fundamentally against going into a war that's got nothing to do with us. Again, even if you ignored the public for a second, just look at international law. Like, we voted you in because you signed up to the United Nations. We're part of that. You didn't say, like Trump or like Farage is implying, oh, let's rip this up, or even Green Party, like let's get out of NATO. You didn't say that. So the association is that you follow international law, and that's why you shouldn't be supporting this Iran war. Do you see what I mean? So I'm with you, love. I do think it's important. I know it sounds, again, it probably sounds like we're contradicting ourselves, but I think there's a fine balance in it because yes, you need to listen to the people, but also how are you hearing those voices and what voices are you listening to? But the flip side, which is at the end of the day, your job is to act in the interests of the people, do the right thing for the country and the vast majority of people. And I think that these guys have access to so much more information than we do. They have access to top civil servants and military professional and security services that see underneath the layer as well to formulate a much bigger picture than what we can see. And I think Brexit is a really great point. Like, my thing with Brexit was it should never have gone to a public vote.
Yeah.
Because none of us were educated enough to make that big a decision. Even as someone, I've studied economics, I studied European economics. Even me, I would say I wasn't educated enough to make that kind of decision because it's so big and it's so far-reaching. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's a really interesting point. I think obviously Brexit is it stands out so much, doesn't it? Because it was such a binary decision that the general public was given to make to a population that hadn't really given it much consideration, hadn't done much research, didn't really prepare themselves for it, just sort of done it off, feel and how they felt in their gut. And it's one of those things where you're like, well, how did the government not know it was going to go this way? Like why? Like it was. I think the accounts I've seen have sort of suggested that David Cameron never really expected it to be a vote that would lead us out of Europe, and thought it was just going to go like quite quickly the other way and remain in Europe and continue as things were. And I imagine it's one of those things where, to your point, where they have so much information and that, their research, their data, all the information that they've gathered, it's probably quite obvious if you're David Cameron that it makes sense to stay in Europe. But it doesn't feel like that information was ever really released or shared. Like, the government almost assumed that everybody would be feeling the benefits of being part of Europe, where actually there was lots of other things going on beneath the surface that sort of led to the vote going in that direction. So, yeah, I think you're right. That I think the government has a lot of information, but I think that information leads to a lot of assumptions that the general public probably don't align with.
Like, even with Brexit, so by all accounts, David Cameron only decided on holding the referendum because of pressure from an internal group of Conservative MPs that were adamant that we needed to leave Europe. Again, I would love for somebody to do an analysis of how much money they made from that decision, because a lot of the people that were donors put huge bets on Britain Brexiting and made a shit ton of money off the back of it. But anyway, the media, which has always been controlled by multimillionaires, a lot of them who are non-domiciled, ironically, pushed for Brexit. So I always remember one of the things I find the most confusing up until the run of the vote was that it was so binary. there was no grey. Every paper presented the binary extreme version. Then you had charlatans like Farage that lied about 350 million. Again, lied about it. And to the point where admitted that it wasn't the case after, the day after the election vote happened, right? So like nobody's held to account. The papers didn't do their job. And the only time that I actually saw a balanced view on Europe was the day after the results came out. And then they were like, oh, look, but the challenge is now what we're going to lose is all of these things. And then you're like,
What
sorry?
the fuck?
Do you know what I mean? So like, I get it. And like going back to Keir Starmer, like nobody's saying like whether he did know or didn't know, nobody's saying that Madelson is not a scumbag because he is. There's no, but he was even knowing about Epstein, to be fair, because like the stuff that the puppet master guy that Madelson always was, like he wasn't like a good guy. Let's not try and kid ourselves here, but
He wasn't an illegal scumbag to our knowledge at that point. He was just a scumbag, you know. And that's the thing. Like, I think in politics we're used to scumbags, you know, and you know, whether they're our own scumbags or you know, international scumbags in government in other countries. I think you know, like I say, I think Keir Starmer decided that hey, we need a scumbag to deal with this scumbag, and so that's seemed like a sensible appointment.
And then we had a US-UK trade deal that came off the back of it, whether we want to like it or not.
Yeah.
And even decisions, to your point, Love, around the balancing of public opinion versus what I'm saying, which is all of the internal information and knowledge. There's a fine balance. Even things like not allowing the US to use Diego Garcia, now allowing the US to use Diego Garcia, not getting involved in the Iran war, defensive only. What does that actually mean? Plus now joining with France to try and quote unquote open the Strait of Hormuz. The thing is, there's the morality piece, which is we should just be principled, put our foot down and say this is nonsense. It is what it is. But the reality is that the UK is already struggling. People are struggling in this country. We cannot afford for electricity prices during winter to skyrocket again because people can't afford to pay as it is. So like as much as you want to be principled and moral and put a hard line, the reality is we have to live in this world and our people are the ones that are going to suffer. The only decision would then be is as a community of British people, do we say, do you know what? It's okay. We're just going to take the hit. We will struggle for another year because we're morally opposed to this. It's the wrong thing to do and we don't care about the consequences. Then fair enough. Like then I'm like, you know what? Amazing. Great. And Spain can do that because they are protected, right? As we discussed before with Europe. But I think that's where it's, and this is what Akala was saying as well, right? Being in government is very different to being out of government. And it's the same with Farage. He's so used to throwing eggs from the sidelines, but actually now he's the party leader and people question him on, you said there was no council tax increases. All of your councils have now increased. And now he's trying to fob it off to, oh, but it was a Y person in X place that said it. But no. Sorry. You're the leader of this party. This is what leadership is. You wanted to be here. You are now in this position and you have to take accountability for all of these things. In the same way, you're asking Starmer to take accountability for this Mandelson thing. So like, you know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah. So two more things. So we have the 62 million and then we have comments. Shall we say the comments till last?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Which unfortunately means we have to talk about, so there was some investigation by the CNN, and they found that there were a website that basically taught men how to drug and rape their partners whilst they were asleep, unconscious, and, you know, go into detail, like checking they were fully asleep and fully unconscious. Before doing that, you know, there's been some conversation around the 62 million number, which is horrible that we're sort of having to debate. people sort of correcting people around whether it was 62 million men or 62 million visits, it feels like it doesn't make a difference to me. Like, the number's still massive. 62 million visits a month to a site that teaches men how to rape their partners. It's so abhorrent that you're like, well, how do we live in this world, right? Like, these men have mothers, have aunts, maybe even have daughters, like we live in a world where men and women have to live side by side, and yet there's a site that is teaching men how to abuse women in this way. Is so disgusting. Like, I hate saying things that feel like this being said just to be a take or just to be clipped, but it kind of makes you hate being a man in a world where this is what men do. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, as a father to a daughter, I'm like, God, how do I protect her from this? Like, what do I have to do? Because now I'm looking at, I jump 10 years into the future when she has, a boyfriend, or how do I not just like throttle that person just in case? Do you know what I mean? Just just in case, like a preemptive strike against her partner. I don't know. It's
And
horrible world to live
it's so egregious, love, because the thing is, as a woman and a girl, you're taught that you have to be careful around strangers. You got to be safe when you go out. So, and if a woman is attacked or sexually assaulted in any way, then generally it's her fault because she went out at the wrong time. She went out too early. She went out too late. She went to a quiet place. She walked down an alley. She didn't dress in a certain way. She wore, the clothes weren't right. The clothes were right. The clothes weren't quite right in the right way on the right day at the right time. Like, there's always something, right? So you're taught that as a woman. Then you're in this era where now increasingly, particularly through studies of young women and girls, because of the rise and the access to pornography, now younger girls who are in relationships or just about dating or meeting guys are now also having to think about things that never had been considered, like choking, like anal sex and that kind of thing, which hadn't really been sort of quote unquote mainstream, which has now been mainstreamized by pornography, right? Now you're also saying that in a secure relationship with a long-term partner or in a marriage where typically you would hope to be safe, of course, we know the statistics around domestic violence and abuse, of course, but you'd almost like you'd want to say to your kids, you've settled down, you're in a long-term relationship, this is a safe place. Now we're saying, oh no, sorry, yeah, no, that's not going to work either, guys. Sorry, because someone's gonna you're gonna have a community of men that are going to be discussing ways to actually make you unsafe, even in this what's supposedly supposed to be a safe state. And that's what, to me, I feel is just so egregious, because it sounds really dramatic as a woman when you say you just can't feel safe. When there was that, that thing that was going around on social media of, would you choose, if you were stuck in a forest, would you choose the bear or would you choose a man? And pretty much overwhelmingly women chose the bear. Like, and then there was all like, oh, people were so upset. But the thing is, love, it is so scary that there doesn't seem to be a safe state. And now, what again I find really funny, which I think we talked about in a different podcast, is when you hear things like this, there are so many men, to your point, that come on there and try and like, but it's not 62 million men, but it's 62 million views. So that actually could be. And then if you statistically analyze, and if you think about, then it's actually only 100,000 people on the Telegram channel that were actually, and you're like, I'm sorry, there shouldn't be one. That is the point here. There shouldn't even be one. So you're arguing about whether one guy viewed it 62 million times in a month, which is statistically impossible. Or you're talking about 62 million men that went on one, or the reality is it's somewhere in the middle. But it's somewhere in the middle means that it's more than one, people.
It shouldn't
More
exist
than
at
one.
all. Like, there's no justification for it. Like, in any terms, there's no number that is an appropriate number. Like, it's just wrong on every level, on every scale. So.
And it's what I find strange as well, love. It's there are so many ways to create. So, they talk about the male loneliness epidemic. They love to talk about how it's so hard for men now because you can't get a job as a man of a certain age, particularly if you're white, and this whole thing because of DEI and blah 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 blah. And then you've got all of these manosphere nutcases who are just trying to get clicks, and but what I find really puzzling about this whole situation is effectively there is a community of men. So there is a group of men that are like, oh, I know, let's connect here. And you've taken one of the most disgusting, violent, egregious things, and that's your point of connection. Do you not see that that might be part of the problem? Like, is this really what your connection point is with another human, that you both want to sexually assault your unconscious wives? I just don't get it. I
Yeah.
don't get it.
It's just sad. It's just so sad. Do you know what I mean?
It's
Like,
so sad.
you worry for humanity that this is a thing. Like it shouldn't. It's just disgusting to think about.
So, and it makes me scared as well, love. Like, I just think, but the way I always think about it is like, I'm really lucky because I have such amazing male role models. Sorry, it's a bit of a tongue twister. Male role, like you, and obviously our other two guy friends, and obviously I'm close to some of my uncles, and I have cousins, and like lots and lots of people I'm fortunate to have in my life that are people that I can look to and say that's a really good male role model. You know what I mean? Like, I always joke with our friends, like, you guys are like couple goals. So I'm like, yeah, do you know, if I meet the right person, that's what I would want a relationship to look like. But it's sad that it isn't like that for everybody, but also that within men, when things like this come up, instead of saying, shit, how do I help? How do I call this out? How do I stop this? The immediate reaction is, oh, well, it's not me. It's not me. So just, that's it. And it's great. It's easy to just draw a line under it. But like, well, it's not me.
Yeah. It's
Every
not
time.
all men. It's not all men. It's like the fact that it's any is the problem.
This is it. This is it.
I kind of, and we're not going to solve this, so like we're not attempting to, but I think it's still worth the discussion. Is it media consumption? Is it upbringing? Is it something else that's happening that allows these things to exist? Like I feel like this is the symptom of the problem and not necessarily the cause of the problem. Is it possible to identify what the cause of this is?
To me, the patriarchy has existed for thousands of years, love. That's the first thing for me. Like, there's always been this hierarchy where men are at the top and women are at the bottom. And that hasn't gone away despite the moves that we've tried to make over time. So the underlying thing of this is, right, when you dig underneath the surface of all of this, the belief is that women are inferior, men are superior, men can do whatever they want to women. And that's how, even in cases of sexual assault, it's not about an attraction thing, it's about a power thing. It's about power, control, violation, dehumanization. Like, it's all of the same things. And in this situation, it's the same thing. It's taking control of the woman, making her into this literally unconscious, so servile state where then you can do whatever you want to this woman. And there's a community of people in that. And even when you think about things like, again, I saw this ridiculous post on LinkedIn by someone who frankly should have known better, saying, in this effectively small sample size of people that he works with, which are white men in tech above a certain age, more of them are unemployed, and it's because women are being hired. Again, you would not believe the number of times I heard that. I mean, it's wild, to the point where a number of women had to go back and say, sorry, just to be clear, there are still loads of white men who I'm working for in all of our leadership roles. I'm not quite sure what you're talking about here. But what always strikes me, and I can never remember the person to credit, is there's this quote: when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
In every single thing I've read, and I've read a lot, as you guys know, that is the one thing that sticks out to me. So in this instance, where all we're saying in DEI is that everybody starts at the same point on the 100-meter race of life, there are going to be instances where a lot of men are left behind, because previously you stood on the 50-meter line in a 100-meter race and you had the advantage. Now you no longer have the advantage because of the hierarchy. Everybody starts at the same place, in which case maybe you're just not good enough.
Yeah.
The only people that ever worry about this shit are average people, and that's across the board. And I say this as an able-bodied person who also has privilege. And instantly, as a brown person, as a brown woman, I have relative privilege to Black women who are so discriminated against. Like, it's crazy. So I say that as someone, like, if I'm not good enough and if a Black woman gets a role, that's because she's better than me. I have to just accept that. Like, and people will say, yeah, but you've got Obama, you've got Jessica Ennis, you've got, I'm like, yeah, but the point is there are exceptional people who start at the -100 and still win the race, but that's because they're exceptional. But they're very, very few and far between. And that's the thing for me with all of this. Fundamentally, you keep going back to the same system, love. Do you know what I mean? And even these people in the Manosphere, what did they really say? They want subservience, they want civility, they believe women are inferior to them, they're less than, stay at home. I'm like, I wouldn't mind staying at home, honestly, because I'm frankly tired of the corporate world. But the thing is, you're going to have to make sure that the lifestyle that I'm accustomed to is maintained. So I want to be able to take however many holidays a year and live in the place that I could afford to by myself, and be safe and be secure. And you have, a year's worth of backup, because if you lose your job, this has to keep going. Like, there's no, like stupid shit like that, love.
I think for me, one of the things that stands out is that if you're a man that can only enjoy sleeping with your partner whilst they're completely unconscious, how weak and limp are you? Like we need to raise strong men that enjoy being challenged. Like, the most attractive thing about my wife is that she is so intelligent. She's so well educated. She does so much. Like, she challenges me. Like, I would hate to be in a relationship where I know I could always win the argument. I know that I know way more than the other person. Like that would just be boring and insufferable. And so, like, why, like, how are there so many men that, like, don't look at that don't want some sort of challenge in their relationship and don't enjoy the challenge? Like, we're literally going in the opposite direction, where we want, like, men are looking for literal dolls. Like, they're not even, like, responsive. They just look like a woman and that's enough. What is going on?
I have a theory about that, love. Okay, which
Please.
everyone thinks I'm crazy about, right? So, like, this whole thing with women, you tell I don't have it, but like with like Botox and fillers and blah blah blah, and these like huge lips and stuff, that kind of thing. I honestly feel like what society, and particularly the patriarchy, is trying to do is get men ready for the time when women are looking like the dolls, but they're not. They're still women. Get ready to the point where the dolls will replace us.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because it's such an artificial looking aesthetic, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And, in the case of real life, love, which is super important, reality TV. No, Married at First Sight Australia, they had a guy who's clearly manosphere. Again, he came on because he clearly wants to become the Australian Andrew Tate or whatever. But again, he talked a lot about, it was in the armed forces, and then he talked a lot about wanting a woman who was subservient. And then they were like, what do you mean by subservient? And then the lady who was with him, every time she kind of questioned something, he'd be like, oh, you're challenging me, you're questioning. And then it's a bit like, and what it always takes me back to, again, we could probably do a whole episode on this, is Jamila Jamil on one of the podcasts said, it always makes me laugh, paraphrasing, but it always makes me laugh when men talk about subservience and power, because they are the most subservient in the armed forces. The only way is you've got a man basically telling you what to do, hour by hour, day by day, instruction by instruction. So how are you strong when you're basically being told you're being subservient, essentially? And that was really stuck with me.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, Jamil should definitely be given more time to say what she said. But let's make sure there's a mic around her more often, because she is a wise woman.
She's so great. She's so great. Yeah. So thank you so much. It's been a really great discussion, Fabian. So I think we should end it here, because obviously we've been talking quite a lot and there's been so much to cover. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed listening. And yeah, thank you so much.
Cheers, guys. We'll be back next week with more. See you then.